He's out there talking about that now. You go to the presidential show and you hear about that. I don't see any harm in the transparency that would come through an audit, and I think you can get that done.
You mentioned Ron Paul. You may not want to answer this, but of all the candidates, presidential candidates, Republican presidential candidates, who do you feel would do the most in restoring the Constitution?
Politics is always interesting because you always wish there was the ideal candidate. Politics is always about kind of the lesser of all evils. And even in this, I get it. I'm not going to be everyone's favorite candidate, right? And each candidate, I wish I could take bits and parts of them and put together. For example, Romney, I think he would do a good job on the economic front. And in fact, I think the day he's elected, it could calm the markets down a little bit, right? Newt Gingrich, another name out there, I think he generates a lot of ideas, some good, some bad, but the fact that he generates those ideas is good. Ron Paul is very strict on the Constitution. I like that's his approach, and I like especially how he wants to take things back to the states, because I think that's where it needs to be. One of the main problems of government is just how intrusive they are, and they've taken so much power that really isn't theirs. And again, that's why I think when we talk about these economics, we're going to accomplish that vision. We're going to have a constitutional government. But the way we get the Democrats on board and everyone else on board is not by saying, our ideals don't mesh. It's by saying, look, we're bankrupt. We have to cut these. We're going to get there. I'm confident we're going to get there when we have the right people in D.C. So, you asked about presidential candidates. I like bits and pieces of all of them. There are things I disagree with Ron Paul. Foreign policy, I think he's a little more aggressive than I am in terms of taking people back. But again, you always wish there was a perfect candidate. and I make that point in this race too. Like I said, as he talks to me, he talks to the other candidates, there might be things we disagree on. But I hope you take the overall picture and see that, my approach is solid. You know what you get. In these meetings, if I disagree with you, I've told you I disagree with. I don't know what your position on the Fed, but I'm assuming you'd like to see the Fed be done away with. Maybe that's something we disagree on. I'll tell you. I'll let you know when we disagree. I think I owe it to you. What I would be worried about is the politicians who are trying to read you and try to answer the question the way you want to think. That's not me. I'll tell you straight out and be honest where I stand, because I think that's the least you deserve. You deserve a candidate who will be that up front and you know their thinking and their approach. So, other questions?
Yeah, Jay, on that last point that you were making, I definitely appreciate that. You seem a lot more practical than a lot of the candidates that go out and promise this and that and take these approaches that sound very extremist. Not that they're not the ideal, but to expect it overnight, I think, is unlikely. And so it's nice to see someone with a practical approach. On that note, there's something I'm struggling with. How American exceptionalism, the attitude toward America seems to, and our greatness seems to be diminishing a little bit. And one thing that I look at is the space program. I was reading something the other day about how, if we want to go up to the space station that we spent $400 billion to build, we have to hitch a ride from the Russians. And China right now is building up their space program and planning on putting a man on the moon by the end of this decade. And how do you balance the spending that it would take to do something great like that versus being fiscally responsible? What do you think is the right thing to do on something like that?
Great question. And I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. Let me talk a little about American exceptionalism and then go actually to specifics of spending, because I think you're right. We believe that we are an exceptional people, exceptional country. We're the city on the hill, the shining city on the hill. And we talk about how that's being undermined. I think when you look at American exceptionalism, you have to talk about what's the foundation of that. And I believe it is the individual liberties we have. I believe it is free markets and capitalism and those things. And I think when those things are being attacked, our American exceptionalism wanes. You mentioned Obamacare. I think that's one thing that hurts our American exceptionalism. We move to a less free market, a less individual rights, personal responsibility. Those principles that the founders knew so well, I think, is what drives our American exceptionalism. So to the extent we can ferret out those undermining forces and those undermining policies, I think it helps restore our American exceptionalism. Now, when we talk about spending, to me, when we talk about spending, you have to talk about the role of the federal government, state government, and priorities. Okay? When we cut a lot of the things the federal government is doing now, like I said, give it to the states or cut it all together, we can focus on some of those national things that stand us up to the whole world as kind of an example. You mentioned the space program. How inspiring was it when Kenny, we were first on the moon, and that was a rallying point, and it was a point. I think we can afford those things if we pull back all the things the government shouldn't be doing. But you're right, at the end of the day, it becomes to priorities and really what we as a country value and what you think would promote our exceptionalism, promote our interest in that. Now, space program specifically, I am nervous that we have to interact with the Russians. Okay? However, though, when we talk about priorities today, I think my first job back there is to cut programs. I don't think NASA would be the top of my list, but we have to look about, again, I go through what we think is constitutional and bring it that way, so that we do have money for truly national interest. And, when we talk about space, there's a lot of international aspects to it, space, and so I do that as a federal issue because of you have to deal with other countries, and it's really an international, global type of issue, which I think the founders envisioned the federal government's role as an international trade and relations and diplomacy and things like that. So, security. Yeah, no, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say that's a state issue right there. So, please.
Yeah, I just want to get your views on some of the realities of the landscape of this race.
Sure.
And I admire your courage for jumping into this, and because I must admit I've lost a lot of sleep over what I've seen, the corruption in our party here locally, especially here. This being kind of ground zero for one of the candidates in the race that I feel actually manipulated the redrawing of the districts to his advantage. I feel he's acted as a puppeteer over our own mayor and city council here in Herriman, the city of Riverton, and just represents the worst of what goes on in the Good Old Boys Network here in Utah. And I'm just curious what your strategy is to be able to overcome that, and the machine and the mechanism that's been in place for the last several years to be able to do it. And because the reality is, it's going to be really tough, I think, for any candidate. And I'm glad that others have jumped into the race too, but I want to do everything I can to make sure that we're represented by the most qualified person and not somebody who manipulates the system to their advantage to put themselves into the brand new congressional district for our state.
Right.
And I'm just very encouraged to see candidates like yourself, but I'm just curious what your strategy is, and that you will hold your opponents to a very high standard. I'm hoping there's going to be multiple debates to where somebody with your background and education and qualifications can actually rise above that and be able to show that we need a primary. This cannot be done in back rooms with the manipulation of the delegates at the convention and everything else. I just hope that it's possible. And I would just like to hear your views on that.
And I appreciate that question. It's a great question. And I'll be as direct and honest as I can. I wouldn't be in this race if I didn't think I could win. Okay? You ask my wife. We go back and forth all the time and say, should we do this? Should we not do it? Okay. But we think we can win. And our strategy is clear. It's people like you. It really is.
And I hope there's enough of us out there that see the reality, that haven't drunk the Kool-Aid that seems to permeate.
But you know what?
Everything here.
We know the lay of the land, right? We've crunched the numbers. We're not doing this foolhardily, okay? We have a very specific strategy. Our first strategy is to get in front of as many people like you as possible. Because I think the way to get to know a candidate is one-on-one, right? And you're right. There are other people out there who are doing different strategies, and they're doing. But at the end of the day, I'm not out to change the delegate system. You couldn't change it by March if we wanted to, right? It's a system we have. But I'm convinced that when we meet face to face and we talk, you'll get to know me better, and it's amazing. I had some people say, I used to be for, K tax, but now, hey, I'm listening to what you say, and although maybe I don't agree with everything, I trust you. I think you have a good head on your shoulders. I think you're going to represent us well. And I think that's the key. In fact, we need help. We need people like you. And every meeting I come to, I said, come volunteer, come help us, because I know my obstacles, okay? I'm not a known politician. I'm not political, so name recognition is huge, right? Fortunately, though, right now, there's a defined delegate base. So it's no longer just name recognition in that base. Right? And as we go further, we'll worry. Infrastructure, we're building. We're volunteers. This is a grassroots campaign, right? And we're raising money. So those are the three things that when you look compared to the other candidates, people say, where are you weak? And I think that's it. On message, on ability to debate, on ability to actually talk about issues, to actually go in depth, to explain how I get from A to B, I think I can hold my own against any of the other candidates.
Hold your own. I think you can do much better.
Yeah, I think I can. But again, so you're right. We recognize the obstacles, but it's going to rely on people like you. And I hope if you like what you hear tonight, you'll go out and spread the word. That's how you get it done. Honestly. And of course, after convention, there's a different strategy, right? You need to go more mass media, especially when we talk about going against Matheson. There's a different strategy there, and I think. And the other plug I give too is when we talk about looking down the road, one thing people have to consider is, who is the best candidate to beat Matheson? Who can actually get that done? And to answer that question, you really got to think about, well, what's Matheson's strategy to win, right? And I don't know his strategy, but if I was him, I'd say, look, I got to win independents and moderates. Right? And if Ronnie's on the top of the ticket, how do I win those? I think he's going to say, well, I could scare the moderates and independents, and I could portray or paint that the Republican nominee is really extreme, really, right-wing. So I don't know if that's what he's going to do, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did. But that tells me is, the person who can beat Matheson is the one who's going to deny Matheson the independent votes.
Right.
And I think the way you do that is you talk about things that unify people in terms of the economy and what we need to do to get our economy back in shape, get our federal deficit spending back in shape, and use that as the rallying point and kind of bring people together, which also gets you to the vision of your constitutional government you want. So I'm a realistic guy. I know it's tough, but again, we wouldn't think we had a winning strategy, and if we didn't think there was a path to victory. I'm not a glutton for punishment. This is a tough thing. You're taking time off, you're doing this, but I've been amazed how as I've gone around and people are just latching on to the campaign. So we want your help too.
It's still early too. I think
we want your help.
It's tough that it's early and that name recognition isn't there, because it's hard when you know that there's people who are the front runners and you're not one of them. But
It'll change.
It'll change. The delegates are thoughtful.
And this is what I'm doing 24/7. I don't know how people can work and run a campaign at the same time. To do this, I'm calling, I'm out there, I'm meeting, and I think that's what it takes.
So you've quit your job to
Mhm.
do this? Wow.
No, but think about why. Why am I doing this? Again, I knew who was running the race, and I just thought, we got to do better. We have to have someone back in D.C. who doesn't just give the speeches, right? Doesn't just more passionate